So what I'm working through right now is an experimental kind of researchy thing to do with controls and components within the context of WordPress Gutenberg. And what you're seeing on screen are those components and controls within this library that I've created, a component library I've created appropriately named G2. And it's named G2 because I think that is the nickname we're using for the new design refresh within the editor. And with this is a from ground up reimagination of the components to fit the needs that we need within the editor, as far as using them to create block controls, and also having the styles and various other things generate in a way that does not get in the way of developers when we need to work with them, or users when they need to use them within Gutenberg. And there are also a lot of considerations into things like accessibility, both from a screen reader perspective. I'm using, underneath the hood, I'm using RiaKit, which is what we're using within Gutenberg. And this one's created by Diego Haas. Very, very cool guy. But we're already using this, and this is what my library uses. And there's also visual considerations like high contrast mode, which is built into every single component here, as well as dark mode, again, built into every single component here. And the thing I was touching upon as far as styles are concerned is right now, styles are a big pain point within the editor, especially if we need certain styles to integrate within, or rather, especially if the theme styles are opinionated in a way that would basically ruin any kind of styles we add within the UI, whether that is coming from core block or core component styles or third-party block styles. If the theme styles don't behave, then it basically disrupts everything. So within the system, there is a custom style system that's built into this component library. And by default, let me see if I can show this. You can see that the style names are unique, like CSS- arbitrary hash. This helps guarantee that nothing can override this, but not only that, you'll see that the class names repeat 3 times. This class name compounding repeating technique is something that it's like a hack within the world of CSS, but it's very effective. And what this does is that it increases the specificity of styles to reduce the chances of something else giving this a hard time. So by default, this doesn't automatically. Us as developers, we don't have to think about it. When we go to write their CSS, it just does it by itself, which is nice. Less to think about, and the developing experience is a lot nicer. So in addition to having a styles kind of system, custom style system built into here, one very exciting thing that I'm working on is an animation system. This one, I've evaluated several libraries and several solutions, but the one I've ultimately chosen to go with is Framer for various reasons. And one of the biggest things when it comes, for me, from my experience, when it comes to animation engines and animation libraries, is they're often very hard to use. So I'll give you an example. React Spring is what we're currently using within the editor. It's a very popular library. I've used this for a while. I'm very familiar with it. But in order to get something like React Spring working, you have to manually write a lot of stuff like this. And at this point, it feels like it's a completely different language. And this is a very simple case. There are other cases where you have to do interpolation and other fancy words and other fancy math to do things. I don't like this. It dissuades people from using the library and the components, which ultimately means that we don't get the experiences that we want within the editor. Every component API, every component within this library and this experience that I'm reimagining should be very easy to use. And in this case, I can give you a demonstration of this library. I don't know if you can see over Zoom, but by default, when you add and remove items, if you choose to use an animated component, it knows how to reduce its height and it knows how to adjust its opacity. So you get this collapsing fade effect. From an animation standpoint, this is actually incredibly difficult to orchestrate, which is why animation engines exist. The reason is because when you remove something, quote, remove something from the browser, you can't just directly remove it. You have to keep a clone of it or do something with it so that you can animate the removal and then remove it from the browser. Doing that manually is very hard, which is why animation engines exist. But using the animations to do something like this typically has been very verbose. Not only that, but this is another wonderful example. If I shuffle them, right, underneath the hood, I am not writing a single code of animation. The engine and the library takes care of it for me. I can show you the code. Let me see. Stories feature, one moment. It is under here, flip. So this is literally all it is. I'm using a card, which are these. Nothing fancy, it's just a card. And I'm saying, oh, yeah, use the motion component as your base. And this is how I want you to animate. Initially, you'll have no opacity. You come in with one opacity, and when you exit, you'll have no opacity. That's the fade in, fade out kind of thing. And there's one magical prop here, layout. What layout does is it automatically detects when this item changes its position or size within the browser, and it'll animate from the start into the end by itself. And this very complex animation that you're seeing right here, where they know how to auto sort and auto resize and do all that stuff, the library does that for us. And we basically kind of get that for free just by using our components and composing them in a way where we can get this kind of experience. So this is when the pieces finally came together and I was able to achieve this. As someone who's worked very in depth with animation engines, like I'm over the moon excited with how simple it is to use. And I think that experience, at least for me as a developer and a designer, that is the main goal I have for this reimagination of this component library, is that it should be easy for our designers and developers and our contributors to use, and also for our third-party block developers to use to build the experiences they want. So if I take a look at this quite complicated example here, I mean, jumping to the code directly, it should be under, excuse me, let's see, components, stories. This one is controls, yeah. It's really just basically a collection of all the components from the library, and done in a very kind of, I think it's quite a nice way of doing it. So here, if we see dimensions, here, we have a control group, which is this cluster. We have a label that says dimensions, and we have a grid of two inputs next to each other. So we just say, oh, we have a grid, and we have a column, two column, and we'll put two text fields inside. Text fields are inputs, and we have a specific suffix, in this case, width and height, right there. And this is all you really need to construct this particular UI here. And that's how it should be. And the thing that I've noticed a lot within the editor is anytime someone has to make a one-off or arbitrary change for reasons, and this typically happens with layout related things. So maybe not so much in this case, but if you needed to add like a margin bottom here, or I need something to align to the left and the right here, you would often have to write some CSS class and write some CSS in order to facilitate that in your particular inspector control. But when you do that, you run into the problem of, oh, well, this might not work with our existing classes, or things will start to fight, and then you have problems and everyone is sad. Quite a few people are sad. By us using components as they're designed, that mitigates the problem a bit. However, there are still chances where you need to do a one-off adjustment for reasons. There's always that chance. And the mistake I see in a lot of component library or design system setups is that they don't really account for that. This is our system, you have to use it as is, no questions asked, you can't get out of the box. And that's where I think a lot of the problems are. And for this particular component system, doing one-off adjustments, the workflow of that is built in. And I'm going to show you how to do that. So let's say for this particular control group, I want the background to be red for reasons. So there is a special property for every single component called CSS. And when you do that, it applies the CSS into the element. Not so special right now, because I mean, you can just do that with a style tag, right? There's no difference. The difference comes from how it's ultimately compiled. What I mean by that is, if we take a look at the styles, we can see the background red is compiled into the CSS itself. There is no style tag. The reason why this is really important is because, and many Gutenberg editors and developers, sorry, not editors, third-party block developers and also core contributors run into this, is having to fight with inline styles. By inline styles, I mean having, you know, the style object and doing blah, 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 because you can't. The specificity of this is ridiculously high. The only way you can beat it is if you add important, which is not great. So having some solution that kind of understands that workflow and helps to accommodate it in a very seamless manner, I think it's important to ensure that this thing scales correctly. And the other cool thing about this, the CSS tag, is that it also knows how to support pseudo, because with inline styles, like if I do style like that, there's no such thing as a hover inline style, right? There are no such things as media queries and all that kind of stuff. At least I believe. I haven't tested this, but we'll see. This knows how to handle pseudo, and also knows what ampersand is. If you're used to the Sass workflow, we have ampersand to do, you know, style compounding, and you can do hover on top of whatever class name this one is. I think this one will work. So let's just try it. If it doesn't work, then I need to adjust my CSS compiler to make this work. But, oh yeah, there you go. That is impossible to do with a style tag. But because we have a very custom and very special CSS style system that's built into every single component, we can do this in a very seamless way. And again, the styles are composed and compiled directly on the element itself. The chances of this breaking something else is literally 0%, because the class names are hashed. So there's no chance that this will conflict with anything else. That's how you can safely and scalably do one-offs adjustments in terms of how style goes within the editor and anywhere else you choose to use these components. The other wonderful thing about this approach, this very custom style system, is, let me see if I can open this code Sandbox. Yeah, is all of these components and packages so far, I have published them onto NPM, mostly for experimental research reasons. And here we have a Code Sandbox instance. And this Code Sandbox is similar to CodePen, but it's kind of more dedicated to like React and other things. I've added them as dependencies. Here we have components and styles. I think you only really need components. I'm able to import them, and I'm able to just use it out of the box without having to do anything. I don't need to import styles. I don't need to do anything with like a Webpack compiler. I don't need to do anything. They just work out of the box, pre-styled, will not conflict with any existing styles or setups or systems. And the beautiful workflow that you get here is individuals are able to prototype things very quickly and share them in an environment outside of WordPress Gutenberg. What I mean by that is, if I'm a third-party block developer working for an agency or something, and here we're trying to figure out the best control of clusters for our new block, and I'm working with a designer, we're pairing together, and we want to like figure out how this interaction will work. I can just fire up a Code Sandbox, plop all this stuff in, play with it, see how it feels. I don't even need a dedicated dev environment. I can do this all in the browser. Technically, you can even do this on an iPad. And see how it feels. If it feels good, I can share the link with other people on my team and we can collaborate in this medium. And that is a wonderful workflow, I think, that can complement the development and design experience of working within the editor as well. And also being able to prototype directly with these components is nice because you get the production grade, interactions and animations and stuff that you won't necessarily get with a Figma or a Framer or something else. You're working directly with the components. And hey, if the code you're writing here is good, you can literally copy and paste this into the code that you're working on, and you have production ready code. You don't need to rewrite anything. So that's really nice. Technically, you can do this with WordPress components as well. And I've tried many times. But where that falls short is that those components, in terms of how they look and feel and interact, they're designed to work specifically within Gutenberg in a Gutenberg editor setup. Using them outside is very difficult. And the reason is because they're not designed to be used outside. But using components outside of the editor was a foundational decision within this component library. And the reason why is because I know that over time, we'll probably want to use these components in WP admin, right? Maybe we want to have Gutenberg blocks perhaps within the admin in certain areas to do certain things. And on top of that, we would like third-party plugin developers, not just block developers, plugin developers, to be able to use these components like a WooCommerce or a Yoast or anyone else, to be able to use these components to give that WordPress ecosystem a consistent feel. So for them, being able to npm install this thing, work on their own dedicated dev environment with these components, it's a really nice workflow, and it's making this easy encourages adaptation for these components and these UIs and these experiences. So yeah, I said a lot. Feel free to chime in anytime you guys want. But yeah, there's a lot of driving factors behind the research, the redesign, the experiments of this particular component library. And it's basically, and this is what I believe as a designer and developer, it's basically exists to make sure everyone has a delightful time. Whether it's using it as an end user or working with it as a developer and a designer. It should be nice. It should be seamless. It should be fun. Yeah. So that's my little spiel for what I got.
Can I ask you a few questions?
Yeah, of course.
So this is, I don't know if you've been looking in the chat, but I pretty much said.
Oh, no, sorry, I have not.
Oh, no,
thank
that's
you,
fine.
man.
No, yeah. So my first question is like, how real is this? Like, you've called it a concept or a prototype. Is this like,
it's ready?
Are we starting to work towards this? It's ready. Okay.
Oh, it's I'll show you. So this is my personal repo. This is where I've been kind of playing with it. It is about 27,000 lines of code ready. That includes stories and so on, but there's no test written for this yet. But yeah, from like a component standpoint, they're basically ready. I have certain issues here where I've started to outline some of these ideas. This is the main one where I describe like these are the various subsystems that are required to create a component library, and then there are certain ones where I go more into detail. And I think a bulk of the work is actually working on those subsystems to make sure that they're as robust as they can be. Because from a UI aesthetics perspective, it's just kind of writing CSS and combining it with HTML, and then you have your UI. But to do something fancy, like what I'm about to show you here, this is probably one of my favorite features, where components are aware of each other and they know how to work with each other and animate with each other. That is like a whole nother level of something. And here I'm going to show you. These are nested modals within this component library. They know how to stack this is what you get in iOS and Mac OS and stuff. No, I don't know about Mac OS, but iOS, by the way, nested modals know how to stack, and they do this by themselves. We implementing it, we don't have to think about it, and they work in various contexts. And this context awareness, this cross-component sibling context awareness thing, I've outlined here, a context system, is really important within a component library because, I mean, components don't live on their own. You have to use them with one another, and then they may behave differently depending on where they live. One simple but really a good example of that is when you have to cluster different input types or different control types together in this way. So here I have a select, I have two inputs, and I have a button. When you combine any control type together, selects, dropdowns, inputs, buttons, and so on, in a control group, they automatically know how to round their corners. That sounds like a very simple thing, but you look into certain component libraries or CSS frameworks, like you can only have, say, a button group, or you can only have an input group. If you wanted to combine both of them, that's tricky. And the CSS needed to do like a button group or whatever is already quite difficult. But here, from a React code component level, they know that they're in a control group and they know what order they're in. So this one knows that it's the first one, these are middle, and that one's an end. And we're able, and with that control group context system, I'm able to build something like, where is it? There's already an incremental control. Right now, this one looks a little funky. And this is an experimental idea, by the way. And the idea for this is that you have an up and down cluster. And you can imagine this being added to the end of an input of a number input, right? Where you can increment up and down. So you can have this and you can stack it vertically. So you can say, oh, for my control group, I want you to stack vertically. And when you do, they know how to round their corners automatically in a vertical fashion. And this same component is used here. That's the same component. It's just, this is what it looks like when it renders horizontally. Instead of the up and down icons, they render minus and plus, and they reverse their positions, and you get the rounded corners of a control group. But the only, and how you achieve something like this versus something like this is you use incremental control, and then you say, I think, direction, which is the prop, and you give it a direction of incremental control. Oh, by default, there's no direction, but then you can say, oh, I want you to align horizontally, and they know how to do that. So yeah, building these really context-aware kind of animation built-in, really smart components for me is really fun, and just because I marvel at the little details when it comes to this stuff. But I think as someone consuming it as a user, it'll be really nice for them because all that tricky bit, all that tricky stuff has already been pre-figured out. And another thing I've been toying with, keeping the theme of developer experiences, here I have the control clusters for, I believe this is a video block within core. And I'm trying to think of and this goes kind of beyond the component library now. This is more like a component library plus block library integration, how can I make this better? And that is, I know that within the editor, like an edit component for any block, writing the glue code that binds the attribute to this particular control and to validate values and to do all that kind of stuff is very fiddly. I've done a lot of that, and it's very, very fiddly. So I was thinking, is there a way where I have a block, for example, here, these are the attributes of a video block, autoplay and attributes and controls and whatever. Is there a way that these controls can just be generated automatically so that I don't have to fiddle with it? And this is something I played with today, but the idea is, okay, so let's say I want to create a video settings panel. I'm going to use the block controls, and I want you to use autoplay, loop, muted, and plays in line. And I'm going to give you a panel title of video settings. And just by doing this, this will generate it for me automatically. Great. And the set attributes and the attributes changing, the check from true, false, or whatever, is bounded automatically. Like I don't have to do that. This is an experimental idea, but I would like to, I would like to, for some of this kind of stuff to happen. This just makes creating controls a little bit more easier. And I think that the less fiddly you are with these individual components, the more, I think, what's the right word? Where things are just kind of like, it just works and things kind of, the more cohesive. Yeah, the more cohesive everything is, because you don't need to fiddle with individual components. There we have smart little hooks or generators or whatever it is that handles that for you. And for me, a big inspiration for all this comes from the world of mobile development. Although I don't have a lot of experience in that world, I've studied it, in particular the React Native world and a little bit of iOS. And that's kind of how they do it. They have a lot of things built into their default components, which is why, at least for our iOS, like things generally look and feel the same, regardless of what app you use. Just because their components and their bare bone primitives are very, very well designed, well intentionally designed, and very smart. And I kind of want to bring that level of I don't know, fun components, smart components to the project, and that's kind of what I've been tinkering around with. Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts?
This is very, very cool. Thank you.
I don't know, just keep jumping to this. This is incredible. Blows my mind. And then earlier today, jumping into this, I was trying to figure out how can I redesign this particular block, that using the new components to kind of make this a little bit nicer. This is still work in progress. Like I started working on this literally right before the call, but I thought, well, what if we did something like this? So we have the device switcher with the desktop, tablet, and then the mobile, like what we have here. But right now, like the number of columns that appear here are based on some, these guys are very detached, and it feels kind of clunky, and you can't sort them. And that's kind of a thing that I kind of want to do within the layout grid component, right? Like I don't have it here, but it's kind of, you can't really work with the dragging too well. So here I thought, what if I use a sortable component so that, I can add and remove as I'd want to, but I can also sort them, drag sort them if I want to move my columns around. That might be kind of fun. And in the gutter, they have size large and just like a little switch here. So I kind of replicated the same kind of thing. But yeah, just still playing around with these. I mean, I'm not sold that this is the right UI yet, but this was a nice experiment because it kind of made me try to recreate like a real world thing that's quite complex in its nature, using the components to see how I can push them.
It creates a lot of flexibility, and that's really,
it does,
really nice.
Yeah. And if you're a third party, I mean, Pal, I know you mentioned drag and drop a lot, and and with this, there is a sortable component. Yeah. So if we're able to provide a sortable component, and all this does is let's see, I can jump into the example, I think. It's fine. So by default, this is all you really need to do. My items. Hopefully you can see my screen. So it knows how to generate like the removals and the drag handles and all that stuff by itself. You just need to give it items and it'll generate the items. Adding or removing items, is based on adjusting this guy. But as you change those attributes, that's how this thing gets updated. But the other thing you need to do is you have to figure out what to do when sorting happens, because the order changes, right? So you have to adjust the data. But yeah, the component handles that for you. And I think it's quite nice. And having something like this, I feel it's quite handy as I've looked through various third-party blocks. Having something like this, I think, would be very helpful for block developers, and also in core. And we can have a nice little drag and drop experience.
Yeah,
Now, this only applies to controls, by the way. We don't have it in the editor because that is a completely separate thing. But I think Sean, you and Michael have been working on FSC, and I think there is like the block navigator thing where you have a list of all the various blocks. Like it'd be cool to be able to drag and sort them as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
For sure, that's in the plans. That would
Awesome.
I was just thinking this is exactly what that reminds me of. It's
Great.
some sort of variation of a sortable list.
Cool. Well, there is just 1 minute left. If I cut off, I apologize, but just wanted to thank everybody so far for hopping on this call. This was so nice being able to share my little project with y'all. And thank you so much for tuning in today. I plan on doing a couple of more of these during this week because it's just so much fun.
Thank you, Q. This is awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was great.
Thanks. Hope you have a wonderful day. Catch you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.